Little black boy runs to bikers for help. His bag reveals the truth. The screech of motorcycle tires against asphalt shatter the evening silence as 8-year-old Tobias Corleone burst through the chain-link fence surrounding Thunder Road Motorcycle Club's compound. His small chest heaved with terror, tears streaming down his dirt-stained cheeks as he clutched a tattered Spider-Man backpack against his trembling body. Behind him, the distant sound of shouting voices grew closer, angry, violent voices that made his blood run cold. Hello there, amazing viewers. I hope you're all doing well today, wherever you're watching from around the world. Before we dive into this incredible story that's about to unfold, I have to ask, have you hit that subscribe button yet? If not, please do it now, because stories like this one will absolutely blow your mind, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The boy's bare feet slapped against the concrete as he stumbled toward the clubhouse, where the rumble of Harley engines had just fallen silent. Through the grimy windows, he could see the silhouettes of leather-clad figures, men whose very presence usually sent people running in the opposite direction. But for Tobias, these intimidating strangers represented his only hope of survival. Jake Bourne, the club's president, was the first to notice the small figure approaching their sanctuary. His weathered hands, marked with scars from countless fights and years of hard living, slowly reached for the .45 caliber pistol tucked beneath his leather vest. At 6'4" with arms covered in intricate tattoos, telling stories of violence and brotherhood, Jake had seen every kind of trouble imaginable walk through their doors. But never anything like this. "What the hell?" muttered Diesel McAllister, the club's enforcer, as he peered through the window blinds. His massive frame filled the doorway as he watched the child approach, confusion replacing his usual stone-cold expression. "Boss, we got a kid out there. Looks scared out of his mind." The other members, Razor, Tank, Phoenix, and Viper, gathered around the windows, their conversations dying to whispers. These were men who had spent their lives on the wrong side of the law, who settled disputes with fists and chrome, who answered to no authority except their own brotherhood. Children were not part of their world. The boy's legs finally gave out just 20 feet from the clubhouse door. He collapsed to his knees, his small body racked with sobs that seemed too deep, too desperate for someone so young. The backpack fell from his grip, and something inside made a soft clinking sound against the concrete, something that would soon change everything these hardened bikers thought they knew about right and wrong. "Please," Tobias whispered into the night air, his voice barely audible, but carrying a weight that seemed to press against the very walls of the compound. "Please don't let him find me. Please." Jake exchanged glances with his brothers, seeing his own confusion reflected in their eyes. In their world, people came to them for protection from rival gangs, from the law, from debts that couldn't be paid. But this was different. This was a child, alone and terrified, carrying secrets in a worn-out school bag that would soon force these unlikely guardians to confront a darkness none of them were prepared for. As Jake slowly opened the clubhouse door, the sound of approaching sirens began to wail in the distance. But they weren't coming to help. They were coming to take the boy back to the very nightmare he was desperately trying to escape. What was in that backpack that would transform a group of hardened criminals into protectors? What kind of evil was chasing this innocent child through the night? And why did the authorities seem more interested in silencing him than saving him? Jake stepped into the cool night air, his boots crunching softly on the gravel as he approached the trembling child. Up close, Tobias looked even smaller, a fragile 8-year-old whose eyes held shadows no kid should ever carry. The boy's clothes were torn and dirty, his lips split and swollen, and there were finger-shaped bruises around his thin wrist that made Jake's jaw clench with a familiar rage. "Hey there, little man," Jake said, his voice surprisingly gentle as he crouched down to the boy's level. "What's your name?" Tobias looked up with wide, terrified eyes that darted between Jake's face and the approaching headlights in the distance. "Tobias," he whispered, "but they're coming for me. They're gonna take me back, and he's gonna—" His voice broke into fresh sobs. Behind Jake, the other members of Thunder Road, MC, emerged from the clubhouse like a wall of leather and steel. Diesel McAllister, whose massive frame and scar knuckles had earned him respect in every bar fight from here to the state line, found himself strangely moved by the child's terror. Despite his reputation as the club's enforcer, Diesel had grown up in foster care himself, He knew the look of a kid running from hell. "Boss," Diesel said quietly, "those sirens are getting closer." Razor Thompson, the club's treasurer, and surprisingly the most educated among them with his accounting background, studied the approaching police cars with calculating eyes. 3 units, moving fast. They're not responding to a call. They're hunting. Tank Rodriguez, whose nickname came from his ability to absorb punishment that would drop most men, stepped forward with uncharacteristic tenderness. "Kid looks like he's been through a war zone," he muttered, his heavily accented voice thick with concern. Tank had 2 daughters of his own, though he rarely spoke about the family he'd lost when his ex-wife moved across the country to keep them away from his lifestyle. Phoenix Williams, the club's youngest member at 28, felt his stomach twist as he noticed the fresh bruises on Tobias's arms. Phoenix had joined the club to escape his own demons, memories of his stepfather's fists and his mother's silence. Seeing this boy brought back every nightmare he'd try to bury under chrome and gasoline. Viper Jackson, the club's road captain and Jake's oldest friend, positioned himself near the fence line, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. Viper had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before the club became his new brotherhood, and his instincts were screaming that this wasn't just about a runaway kid. "Please don't give me back to them," Tobias begged, clutching his backpack tighter. "I got proof. I got proof of what they did, but nobody believes me. The police, they're working with him. They're all working with him." Jake's blood ran cold. In his 15 years leading Thunder Road MC, he'd seen corruption, violence, and betrayal in every form imaginable. But something in this child's voice carried a truth that cut through all his cynicism. "Who's him, son? Who are you running from?" Before Tobias could answer, the first police cruiser screeched into the compound's parking lot, followed quickly by 2 more. The officers who emerged weren't the usual beat cops Jake was used to dealing with. These men moved with military precision, their hands already resting on their weapons. "That's Detective Raymond Kellerman," Viper whispered, recognizing the lead officer. "He's as dirty as they come. Word is he's got connections all the way up to the mayor's office." Detective Kellerman approached with a cold smile that never reached his eyes. "Evening, gentlemen. We're looking for a missing child. 8 years old, black male, probably scared and confused. His father's worried sick." Jake stood slowly, placing himself between the detective and Tobias. "Don't see any missing kids here, detective. Just a motorcycle club, minding its own business." "Now, Jake, we both know you're not in the habit of lying to law enforcement," Kellerman said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. "The boy's name is Tobias Corleone. His father reported him missing about an hour ago. Said the kid's been having some behavioral issues lately. Making up stories, acting out. You know how it is with troubled children." Behind Jake, Tobias whimpered and pressed himself against Diesel's massive leg. The enforcer's hand came down protectively on the boy's shoulder, and for the first time in years, Diesel felt something other than anger burning in his chest. "Funny thing about that," Razor interjected, his accountant's mind already working the angles. "Kid shows up here beaten half to death, and you're telling us his loving father is worried? Seems like maybe the father should be answering some questions instead of us." Kellerman's smile faltered slightly. "I'm going to need you boys to step aside. This is official police business, and I'm going to need to see a warrant," Jake replied, crossing his arms. "This is private property, and last I checked, we still had rights in this country." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The other officers had spread out, trying to flank the bikers, but Thunder Road MC had faced down worse odds than this. What they hadn't faced was the moral complexity of protecting a child whose very presence challenged everything they thought they knew about themselves. Tobias tugged on Jake's leather vest with trembling fingers. "Mr. Jake," he whispered, "I need to show you what's in my bag, but not in front of them. Please. If they see it, they'll kill me. They'll kill us all." The word sent a chill down Jake's spine. Whatever was in that Spider-Man backpack, it was worth killing for. And if the police were involved, it meant the corruption went deeper than any of them had imagined. As the standoff continued, Jake realized that Thunder Road MC was about to face their greatest challenge yet. Not from rival gangs or federal raids, but from their own consciences. Because sometimes being the bad guys meant doing the right thing, even when the good guys were the ones you had to fight. What secrets was this brave little boy carrying? And how far would these unlikely protectors go to keep him safe from the very people who were supposed to protect him? The tension is building. What do you think is in Tobias's backpack? Drop your theories in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed because this story is about to take some incredible turns. The standoff stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Detective Kellerman's patience was wearing thin, his hand now openly resting on his service weapon. The other officers had positioned themselves strategically around the compound, but Jake noticed something that made his blood run cold. They weren't just trying to retrieve a missing child. They were setting up a perimeter like they were preparing for a siege. "Last chance, Jake," Kellerman said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Hand over the boy, and we'll forget you interfered with police business. Keep playing games, and I'll have this whole place torn apart for weapons violations, drug possession, whatever I need to put you all away." Jake was about to respond when a new voice cut through the tension like a blade. "That won't be necessary, Detective." Everyone turned to see a woman stepping out of a sleek black sedan that had just pulled up to the compound. She was in her early 30s, with shoulder-length auburn hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the scene in seconds. Her tailored business suit and confident stride marked her as someone used to being in control. But there was something else, a fierce determination that reminded Jake of a lioness protecting her cubs. "And you are?" Kellerman demanded, clearly annoyed by this new complication. "Sarah Connor," she replied, pulling out a leather wallet and flashing credentials. "Child Protective Services, Special Investigations Unit. I'm here about the Tobias Corleone case." Jake felt Tobias stiffen behind him. The boy's grip on his backpack tightened, and he whispered urgently, "She's not like the others. She's been trying to help me, but they won't let her." Sarah's eyes found Tobias, and Jake saw something flicker across her face, relief mixed with professional concern. "Hello, Tobias. Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm okay, Miss Sarah," Tobias said, his voice still shaky but stronger than before. "I got away before it got worse." Kellerman stepped forward aggressively. "Miss Connor, this is a police matter. The child needs to be returned to his legal guardian immediately." "Actually, Detective, that's where you're wrong." Sarah pulled out a manila folder from her briefcase. "As of 3 hours ago, I filed an emergency petition for protective custody. Tobias Corleone is now under the temporary guardianship of the state, pending a full investigation into allegations of abuse." The color drained from Kellerman's face. "That's impossible. I would have been notified." "You would have been, if you weren't currently under internal investigation yourself," Sarah interrupted smoothly. "It seems there have been some questions about your handling of previous child welfare cases, specifically cases involving the Corleone family." Jake watched this verbal chess match with growing admiration. This woman, Sarah, was clearly fighting the same battle they were, just from inside the system. But the way Kellerman's jaw clenched told him that she was walking into dangerous territory. "You're making a big mistake, lady," Kellerman growled. "You have no idea what you're dealing with here." "Actually, I have a very good idea," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the obvious threat. "Which is why I'm here to ensure Tobias's safety until we can get to the bottom of this." Diesel stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the detective. "Sounds like the kid's in good hands now. Maybe it's time for you boys to move along." Kellerman's hand moved toward his weapon, but before he could draw it, Viper's voice cut through the air with military precision. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Detective. See, we've got security cameras all over this compound. Everything that's happened here tonight is being recorded. Would hate for footage of police officers threatening a child and his legal guardian to end up on the evening news." The detective's eyes darted around the compound, spotting the cameras he'd missed in his initial assessment. His face twisted with rage, but he was trapped and he knew it. "This isn't over," Kellerman snarled, backing toward his cruiser. "Not by a long shot." As the police cars pulled away, their sirens wailing in frustrated defeat, Sarah turned to face the bikers. Jake expected her to be intimidated by their appearance, but instead, she looked at them with something approaching gratitude. "Thank you," she said simply, "for protecting him." "Don't thank us yet," Jake replied. "We still don't know what we're dealing with here." Tobias looked up at Sarah with desperate eyes. "Miss Sarah, I need to show them what's in my bag. They need to know the truth about my daddy and what he's been doing." Sarah knelt down beside the boy, her professional demeanor softening. "Are you sure you're ready for that, sweetheart? Once we open that bag, There's no going back. Tobias nodded with a courage that broke Jake's heart. They need to know. Everyone needs to know. With trembling hands, Tobias unzipped his Spider-Man backpack. The first thing that emerged was a small digital camera, its memory card slot glowing red to indicate it was full. But that wasn't what made the hardened bikers gasp in shock. Beneath the camera were dozens of photographs, printed images that showed things no child should ever see, let alone document. There were pictures of men in expensive suits, of money changing hands, of children who looked just as terrified as Tobias. And at the center of it all was a man who bore a striking resemblance to the boy, his father, Vincent Corleone. But the photographs weren't the most damning evidence. At the bottom of the bag, wrapped in a plastic sandwich bag, was a small notebook filled with dates, times, and names written in a child's careful handwriting. Names that Jake recognized: city councilmen, judges, police officers, and businessmen who ran in the highest circles of power. Jesus Christ, Phoenix whispered, his face pale as he realized what they were looking at. Kid, how long have you been collecting this? 2 years, Tobias said quietly. Ever since I figured out what Daddy was really doing in the basement. He thought I was too little to understand, but I knew it was wrong. I knew those other kids were scared like me. Sarah's hands shook as she examined the evidence. Tobias, this is bigger than we thought. This isn't just about abuse. This is about human trafficking. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jake felt something shift inside his chest. A protective instinct he hadn't felt since his own daughter had died in a car accident 5 years ago. This wasn't just about helping a scared kid anymore. This was about taking down a network of monsters who preyed on the innocent. They're going to come back, Tank said grimly. And next time, they won't be playing games. Let them come, Jake replied, his voice hard as steel. Thunder Road MC has never backed down from a fight, especially when it's for something that matters. Sarah looked at these unlikely allies, men who lived outside the law, but who were willing to risk everything to protect a child. If we do this, if we take on Vincent Corleone and his network, we're going to need each other. The system is compromised, but together, we might have a chance. As if summoned by her words, Tobias's small hand slipped into Jake's calloused one. Will you help me stop them, Mr. Jake? Will you help me save the other kids? Jake looked down at this brave little boy who had risked everything to expose the truth and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. Yeah, kid, we're going to help you, and we're going to make sure they never hurt another child again. But as the night deepened around them, none of them realized that Vincent Corleone was already mobilizing forces that would test their resolve in ways they couldn't imagine. The war for Tobias's life, and the lives of countless other children, was just beginning. The stakes just got real. What do you think will happen when Vincent Corleone discovers his son has escaped with evidence that could destroy everything? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to explode. The Thunder Road Clubhouse had been transformed into an unlikely war room. Sarah spread the photographs across the scarred wooden table while the bikers gathered around, their faces growing darker with each image they examined. The evidence painted a picture so horrific that even these hardened men struggled to process it. This one here, Tobias said, pointing to a photograph with a shaking finger. That's Judge Morrison. He comes to Daddy's party sometimes. And this man, he indicated another figure. That's Police Captain Hayes. He always brings the scared kids. Jake's hands clenched into fists as he studied the images. Vincent Corleone wasn't just abusing his own son. He was running a sophisticated trafficking operation that reached into every level of local government. The basement of the Corleone mansion had been converted into something that belonged in Jake's worst nightmares. How many children? Sarah asked gently, though her professional composure was cracking. I counted 17 different kids in the past year, Tobias replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Some of them stopped coming back. The silence that followed was deafening. Diesel turned away from the table, his massive shoulders shaking with barely contained rage. Tank muttered a prayer in Spanish, crossing himself repeatedly. Phoenix had gone completely pale, his own childhood trauma reflected in every horrific detail. We need to get this to the FBI, Sarah said, reaching for her phone. This is beyond local jurisdiction now. No, Viper said sharply, causing everyone to look at him. You call the feds, and half of them are probably on Vincent's payroll too. We've seen how deep this goes. As if to prove his point, Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen, and her face went white. It's my supervisor. I didn't tell anyone I was coming here tonight. Jake nodded grimly. Don't answer it. They're already tracking you. Sarah's phone continued to ring, then stopped, then immediately started ringing again. The message was clear. Someone very powerful wanted to know where she was and what she was doing. Miss Sarah, Tobias said quietly, you can't go back to your office. Daddy has people everywhere. He told me once that he owns half the city. Before Sarah could respond, the compound security system chimed. Razor, monitoring the cameras from his laptop, looked up with concern. We got company. Black SUVs, 3 of them, parking just outside the fence line. They're not making a move yet, just watching. Jake moved to the window and peered through the blinds. The vehicles were expensive, with tinted windows that made it impossible to see inside. But their positioning was strategic. They had all the exits covered. They're not cops, Viper observed, joining Jake at the window. Private security. Military bearing. These guys are professionals. Sarah's phone buzzed again, this time with a text message. She read it aloud, her voice trembling. Ms. Connor, you have something that doesn't belong to you. Return immediately, and no one gets hurt. You have 1 hour. How did they get your number? Diesel asked. It's not hard when you own the phone company, Sarah replied bitterly. Vincent Corleone's legitimate businesses include telecommunications, real estate, and construction. He's got access to everything. Tank moved to check the weapons locker, his military training kicking in. We got enough firepower to hold them off, but if they're smart, they'll wait for us out. Cut the power, block the roads, make this a siege. We can't fight them here, Jake realized. Not with the kid. Too much risk of collateral damage. As if reading his thoughts, Tobias tugged on Jake's vest. There's another way out. I know because I've been watching this place for weeks, trying to work up the courage to come here. There's a drainage tunnel that runs under the back fence. It comes out near the old railroad tracks. Phoenix knelt down beside the boy. How do you know about that? I know lots of things, Tobias said with a maturity that was heartbreaking in someone so young. When you're trying to stay alive, you learn to notice everything. Sarah was studying the photographs again, her mind working frantically. We need to get this evidence to someone we can trust. But who? Vincent's network is too extensive. I might know someone, Jake said slowly. My ex-wife works for a newspaper in the state capital. Investigative journalist. If anyone would run this story, it's her. Your ex-wife. Diesel raised an eyebrow. The one who left you because of the club? Yeah, well, Jake's jaw tightened. Turns out she was right about some things. Maybe it's time I admitted that. The admission hung in the air, revealing a vulnerability that Jake rarely showed. Sarah found herself looking at this leather-clad biker with new eyes. Beneath the tattoos and scars was a man grappling with his own demons, trying to find redemption in protecting an innocent child. What's her name? Sarah asked. Rebecca Stark. She works for the Capital Tribune. It won't be easy to reach her, though. We didn't exactly part on good terms. Razor looked up from his laptop. I can get you a secure connection. Route it through several proxies. Make it untraceable. But we need to move fast. Those SUVs are getting reinforcements. As if summoned by his words, 2 more vehicles appeared on the security monitors. The watchers were becoming an army. There's something else, Tobias said, his voice so quiet they almost missed it. Daddy doesn't just hurt kids. He makes movies of it, and he sells them to people all over the world. The money goes into accounts in different countries. Sarah's face went ashen. Tobias, how do you know about the money? Because I'm good with numbers. Daddy taught me to help with his business records. He thought it was just math homework. The boy's innocence, corrupted by exposure to such evil, broke something inside each of them. Jake made a decision that would change all their lives. We're getting you out of here, kid. All of us. We're going to take this evidence to people who can't be bought, and we're going to make sure your father and everyone who helped him pays for what they've done. And if we can't find anyone who can't be bought, Viper asked. Jake's smile was cold as winter steel. Then we handle it ourselves. The old-fashioned way. Sarah started to protest, but then she looked at Tobias, this brave little boy who had risked everything to expose the truth, and realized that sometimes the system failed so completely that good people had to work outside it. There's a safe house, she said quietly. Off the books. I use it for witnesses in extreme cases. If we can get there, we'll have time to plan our next move. How far? Tank asked, already calculating routes and escape strategies. 40 miles north. But we'll have to get past Vincent's people first. Diesel cracked his knuckles, a sound like breaking bones. Leave that to us. As they prepared to leave, Tobias slipped his small hand into Sarah's. Miss Sarah, are you scared? She looked down at this remarkable child who had shown more courage than most adults ever would. Yes, sweetheart. I'm terrified. But sometimes being scared means you're doing something important. That's what my mama used to tell me, Tobias said softly, before Daddy made her go away. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Vincent Corleone hadn't just been abusing children. He'd been eliminating anyone who might expose him, including his own wife. Outside, the circle of watchers was tightening. But inside the clubhouse, an unlikely family was forming, bound not by blood or law, but by a shared determination to protect the innocent and seek justice for the voiceless. The war was about to begin, and none of them knew if they would survive it. But they knew one thing for certain. They would rather die fighting than live knowing they had failed this brave little boy who had trusted them with his life. The tension is reaching a breaking point. How do you think they'll escape Vincent's trap? And what happened to Tobias's mother? Share your theories below and make sure you're subscribed because the next part is going to be absolutely explosive. The escape through the drainage tunnel had been harrowing, but successful. Now, huddled in Sarah's off-the-books safe house, a modest cabin hidden deep in the state forest, the unlikely alliance was about to discover that everything they thought they knew about Vincent Corleone's operation was just the tip of an iceberg that reached into the highest levels of power. Sarah had managed to establish a secure connection with Rebecca Stark, Jake's ex-wife, who was driving through the night to meet them. The tension between Jake and the prospect of seeing Rebecca again was palpable, but it was overshadowed by a much more shocking revelation that was about to unfold. Tobias sat curled up on the cabin's worn couch, his Spider-Man backpack clutched protectively against his chest. He had been quiet since their escape, but now he looked up at the adults with eyes that held a terrible knowledge. There's something else I need to tell you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Something about my mama. Sarah knelt beside him, her heart already breaking for what she might hear. What about your mama, sweetheart? She didn't just go away, Tobias said, tears beginning to stream down his cheeks. Daddy killed her, and I saw it happen. The words hit the room like a bomb. Jake felt his blood turn to ice, while Diesel's massive hands clenched in a fist that could crush steel. But it was Sarah who managed to find her voice first. Tobias, are you sure? Sometimes when we're scared, our minds can. I'm sure, the boy interrupted, reaching into his backpack with trembling hands. Because I recorded it. He pulled out a second device, an old smartphone with a cracked screen. Mama gave this to me for emergencies. She told me to hide it and never let Daddy find it. The night it happened, I heard them fighting in the basement. I snuck down and recorded everything. Sarah's hand shook as she took the phone. The video file was dated 18 months ago. She looked around the room at the hardened bikers, men who had seen violence in every form, and realized that what they were about to witness would change them all forever. You don't have to watch this, she told Tobias gently. Yes, I do, he replied with heartbreaking determination. Mama made me promise to tell the truth about what Daddy did. She said someday, someone would believe me. Sarah pressed play, and the room fell into a silence so complete that the only sound was their collective breathing. The video was shaky, filmed from behind a stack of boxes in the basement, but the audio was crystal clear. Vincent Corleone's voice filled the room, cold and calculating. You should have kept your mouth shut, Maria. You should have just played your part like a good wife. Those children, Vincent, came a woman's voice, desperate and pleading. They're babies. How can you do this to them? How can you sell them like animals? Because it's profitable, Vincent replied with chilling matter-of-factness. And because I can. You think your conscience matters more than the millions of dollars this operation generates? You think your moral outrage is worth more than the protection we get from judges, senators, even federal agents? Jake's blood ran cold. Senators, federal agents. This wasn't just a local trafficking ring. It was a national network. In the video, Maria Corleone's voice grew stronger, more defiant. I've already contacted the FBI. Agent Patricia Mills is investigating. The sound of a gunshot cut her words short. The phone clattered to the ground as young Tobias apparently dropped it in shock. But the audio continued to record Vincent's voice, now speaking to someone else in the room. Clean this up. Make it look like she ran off with another man. And find out everything Agent Mills knows. If she's a problem, eliminate her. What about the kid? Came another voice. One that Jake recognized with a chill as Detective Kellerman. He's too young to understand what he saw. And he's useful for keeping the other children in line. They behave better when they think their families might suffer. The video ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. Sarah's face was pale as she processed the implications. Agent Patricia Mills. I know that name. She disappeared about a year ago. The Bureau said she was working undercover. But she's dead. Viper finished grimly. Just like Tobias's mother. Jake stood up abruptly, pacing to the window as he struggled to contain his rage. This wasn't just about child abuse anymore. It was about a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of law enforcement and government. They weren't just fighting Vincent Corleone. They were fighting a system that had been corrupted from the inside out. There's more, Tobias said quietly, pulling out the notebook they'd seen earlier. Mama helped me write down everything before she died. All the names, all the places, all the money transfers. She said if anything happened to her, I should give this to someone who would fight for the truth. Sarah took the notebook with reverent hands, scanning pages filled with meticulous documentation. Bank account numbers, meeting locations, coded references to shipments of merchandise. It was a roadmap to an international trafficking network that generated hundreds of millions of dollars annually. Jesus Christ, Phoenix whispered, reading over her shoulder. They're not just trafficking kids locally. They're shipping them overseas. Look at these shipping manifests. Tank, whose military background included intelligence work, studied the documents with growing alarm. These routes, they're using military transport. Someone with high-level clearance is facilitating this. Before anyone could respond, the sound of a car engine approaching made them all freeze. Jake moved to the window, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. But then he relaxed slightly. It's Rebecca, he said, his voice tight with emotions he'd buried for years. Rebecca Stark stepped out of her sedan, and Sarah was struck by how different she was from what she'd expected. Instead of the bitter ex-wife she'd imagined, Rebecca was a woman in her late 30s with intelligent eyes and an air of quiet strength. She moved with the confidence of someone who had spent years uncovering truths that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. When she entered the cabin, her eyes immediately found Jake's, and for a moment, the years of hurt and anger seemed to fall away. But then she saw Tobias, and her journalist's instincts kicked in. "This is the boy?" she asked, her voice gentle but professional. "Rebecca," Jake said awkwardly, "I know we have history, but right now, that doesn't matter," she interrupted, moving to kneel beside Tobias. "What matters is getting this story out before they silence everyone who knows the truth." She looked at the evidence spread across the table, her face growing pale as she realized the scope of what they'd uncovered. "My God, Jake, this isn't just a story. This is the story of the decade. Maybe the century. Can you run it?" Sarah asked urgently. "Can you get this published before they stop you?" Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, studying the photographs and documents. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with the weight of what she was about to undertake. "I can run it. But once I do, there's no going back. They'll come after all of us with everything they have. Are you prepared for that?" Jake looked around the room at his brothers, at Sarah, and finally at Tobias. This brave little boy who had risked everything to expose the truth about monsters who hid behind badges and judicial robes. "We're prepared," he said firmly. "But there's something else you need to know. Something that changes everything." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "What?" Jake's voice was grim as he delivered the revelation that would transform their mission from rescue to revolution. Vincent Corleone isn't the head of this operation. He's just middle management. The real power behind this network, it goes all the way to Washington, D.C. As the implications of his words sank in, they all realized that they weren't just fighting for Tobias anymore. They were fighting for every child who had been stolen, sold, and silenced by a conspiracy so vast and so protected that it had operated with impunity for years. The war they were about to wage wouldn't just be against criminals. It would be against the very institutions that were supposed to protect the innocent. And the only weapons they had were the truth, their courage, and an unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of shared purpose. But sometimes, that was enough to change the world. The conspiracy goes deeper than anyone imagined. How high up does this corruption reach? And can this unlikely alliance really take on such powerful enemies? Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because the next part will reveal just how far they're willing to go for justice. The attack came at dawn, swift and merciless. Sarah jolted awake to the sound of splintering wood as the cabin's front door exploded inward. Black-clad figures poured through the opening like a deadly tide, their movements coordinated with military precision. Red laser dots danced across the walls as automatic weapons swept the room, searching for targets. Federal agents. Nobody moves. But these weren't real federal agents. Sarah could tell by their equipment, their tactics, their complete disregard for proper procedure. These were Vincent Corleone's private army, dressed up to look official. Jake rolled off the couch where he'd been sleeping, reaching for his pistol, but a boot to his ribs sent him sprawling. Diesel roared in fury as 3 men tackled him, using tasers to bring down his massive frame. Tank and Phoenix were zip-tied before they could fully wake up, while Viper disappeared in a hail of rubber bullets that left him unconscious and bleeding. "Where's the boy?" The team leader's voice was cold, professional. "Where's Tobias Corleone?" Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized that Tobias was nowhere to be seen. In the chaos of the assault, the 8-year-old had simply vanished. But before she could feel relief, rough hands hauled her to her feet, and she found herself staring into the face of Detective Kellerman. Well, he sneered. "If it isn't the crusading social worker. You should have minded your own business, lady." "Where is he?" Sarah demanded, struggling against the zip ties cutting into her wrists. "Where's Tobias?" Kellerman's smile was cruel. "Don't worry about the kid. He's going home to Daddy, where he belongs. As for you and your biker friends, well, let's just say you're about to have a very unfortunate accident." Across the room, Jake was hauled to his feet, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. His eyes met Sarah's, and she saw something there that terrified her more than the guns pointed at their heads: defeat. For the first time since she'd met him, Jake Bourne looked like a man who had given up hope. The evidence, one of the fake agents reported. It's gone. The photographs, the notebook, the phone, everything. Kellerman's face darkened. "What do you mean gone?" "Someone got here before us. Cleaned out everything." Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Rebecca, Jake's ex-wife, must have taken the evidence when she left the night before. But that hope died when Kellerman pulled out his own phone and showed her a video feed. On the screen, Rebecca Stark sat bound to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. Her face was bruised, her clothes torn, and her eyes held the hollow look of someone who had been broken by hours of interrogation. "Your journalist friend was very cooperative once we explained the situation to her," Kellerman said with satisfaction. "She told us everything. Where the evidence is, who she contacted, what she planned to publish. Very thorough, very professional." Jake's roar of rage was cut short by a rifle, but to his stomach. He doubled over, gasping, but his eyes never left the screen showing Rebecca's battered form. "You bastards," he wheezed. "If you hurt her, you'll what?" Kellerman laughed. "You're in no position to make threats, biker. In about an hour, this cabin is going to burn down with all of you inside it. Tragic accident. Gas leak, probably. These old places are so dangerous." As if to emphasize his point, Sarah could smell gasoline being poured around the cabin's exterior. They were going to be burned alive, and it would look like an accident to anyone who investigated. "The boy saw his mother die," Sarah said desperately, trying to buy time. "He has video evidence. Even if you kill us, the truth will come out." "Will it?" Kellerman's smile was genuinely amused. "You think Vincent Corleone got where he is by leaving loose ends? The kid's phone was destroyed months ago. The evidence you thought you had? All fabricated. Planted to make you think you had something real." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "That's impossible. Tobias showed us. Tobias showed you what we wanted him to show you." Kellerman interrupted. "The boy's been working for us all along. Did you really think an 8-year-old could outsmart a network that's been operating for decades?" The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Everything they believed, Everything they'd fought for had been a lie. Tobias hadn't been a victim seeking help. He'd been bait in an elaborate trap. No, Jake said, his voice hoarse with disbelief. The kid was terrified. You can't fake that kind of fear, can't you? Kellerman pulled out his phone again, this time showing them a different video. It was Tobias, but not the frightened child they'd known. This Tobias was calm, composed, speaking directly to the camera with an adult's vocabulary and mannerisms. "Hello, Mr. Jake," the recorded Tobias said. "If you're watching this, it means the operation was successful. I'm sorry I had to lie to you, but Daddy says sometimes we have to hurt good people to protect the family business. You seem nice, though. I hope it doesn't hurt too much when you die." The video ended, leaving the cabin in stunned silence. Sarah felt something break inside her chest. Not just her heart, but her faith in her ability to protect children, to recognize victims, to tell the difference between innocence and manipulation. Diesel, barely conscious from the tasers, managed to lift his head. The kid, the bruises, they were real. Of course they were real, Kellerman said dismissively. Vincent's not sentimental about his son. The boy needed to look the part, so Vincent made sure he looked convincing. A few bruises, some tears, and you bleeding hearts fell for it completely. Jake closed his eyes, and Sarah could see him reliving every moment of their interaction with Tobias, reinterpreting every gesture, every word, every tear through this new, horrible lens. The child they'd risked everything to protect had been their enemy all along. The other children in the photographs, Sarah whispered. Were they real? "Oh, they're real," Kellerman confirmed. "And they're all safely relocated to new facilities. Thanks to your little rescue mission, we were able to identify and eliminate several security vulnerabilities in our operation." Vincent's very grateful. The fake federal agents were finishing their preparations. Sarah could hear them outside, setting charges, preparing to make the cabin's destruction look like a gas explosion. In minutes, they would all be dead, and the trafficking network would continue operating with even better security than before. "Why?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. "Why go through all this elaborate deception? Why not just kill us quietly?" Kellerman's expression grew serious. "Because Vincent Corleone is a businessman, and good business requires sending messages. You represented a threat to our operation. Not just you personally, but what you represented. The idea that someone could challenge us, expose us, bring us down, by destroying you so completely, by turning your own compassion against you, we sent a message to anyone else who might think about playing hero." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We don't just kill our enemies, Miss Connor. We break them first. We make them understand that their hope was always an illusion, that their courage was always meaningless, that their love for children was just another weapon we could use against them." As the smell of gasoline grew stronger and the sound of approaching flames reached their ears, Sarah realized that this was more than murder. It was a systematic destruction of everything good and decent in the world. Vincent Corleone and his network didn't just traffic children. They trafficked in despair, turning love into a liability and hope into a trap. The cabin's windows began to glow with orange light as the fires were lit. Soon, the flames would reach the gasoline-soaked walls, and their deaths would be swift but agonizing. But even worse than the prospect of dying was the knowledge that they had failed completely, that their efforts to save Tobias had actually strengthened the very network they tried to destroy. In the growing heat and smoke, Sarah found herself thinking about all the real victims they'd never be able to help, all the children who would suffer because their rescue mission had been turned into a trap. The darkness wasn't just closing in around the cabin, it was closing in around the world itself, snuffing out the light of justice and hope one flame at a time. But sometimes, in the darkest hour, when all seems lost and evil appears to have triumphed completely, the most unexpected heroes emerge from the shadows. And sometimes, the very despair that threatens to destroy us becomes the catalyst for a courage we never knew we possessed. The flames were rising, but the story wasn't over yet. Everything they believed was a lie. How could Tobias have deceived them so completely? And is there any hope left for our heroes as the flames close in? Share your shock in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed because the next part will determine whether good can triumph over such overwhelming evil. The flames licked at the cabin's walls, and smoke began to fill the room as Sarah closed her eyes, preparing for the end. But then, through the crackling of burning wood, she heard something impossible, a child's voice, high and desperate, cutting through the chaos. "Stop. Please stop. I lied. I lied about everything." Sarah's eyes snapped open to see a small figure silhouetted in the smoke-filled doorway. It was Tobias, but not the composed, manipulative child from Kellerman's video. This was the terrified 8-year-old they'd first met, tears streaming down his face, his small body shaking with genuine terror. "Tobias." Kellerman spun around, his face a mask of confusion and rage. "What the hell are you doing here? You're supposed to be with your father." "I ran away again." Tobias sobbed, stumbling into the burning cabin. "I couldn't let you kill them. They tried to help me, and I had to lie because Daddy said he'd hurt more kids if I didn't. But I can't let you murder them." The fake federal agents raised their weapons, but Kellerman held up a hand, his mind racing to understand this new development. "Kid, you're not making sense. Stick to the script." "There is no script." Tobias screamed, his voice breaking with anguish. "There never was. Daddy made me memorize that video months ago, but it was all lies. The bruises were real. The fear was real. Everything I told them was true." Sarah felt her world tilt on its axis. "Tobias, what are you saying?" The boy turned to her with eyes full of desperate honesty. "Miss Sarah, I'm sorry I had to trick you at first. But when Daddy found out I'd escaped, he told me I had to come back and pretend it was all fake, or he'd kill the other kids. He made me make that video to confuse you, but I never wanted to hurt you." Kellerman's face had gone pale. "That's impossible," Vincent said. "Vincent lied to you too." Tobias interrupted, pulling something from his pocket, a small recording device. "He's been recording all your conversations, Detective Kellerman. He's planning to kill you and blame everything on you when the FBI gets too close." The detective's hand moved toward his weapon, but before he could draw it, the sound of real sirens filled the air. Not the fake ones they'd used before, but the distinctive wail of actual federal vehicles. "What the hell?" one of the fake agents started to say, but his words were cut off by the sharp crack of sniper fire. The cabin's windows exploded inward as real FBI agents stormed the building, their tactical gear and professional movements a stark contrast to the mercenaries who had been masquerading as federal officers. "FBI. Real FBI. Drop your weapons." In the chaos that followed, Sarah saw Jake break free from his restraints. Apparently, he'd been working on them the entire time they'd been talking. With a roar of fury, he tackled Kellerman, and the two men crashed through the cabin's back window in a tangle of fists and fury. Diesel, shaking off the effects of the tasers, grabbed two of the fake agents and slammed their heads together with a sound like breaking coconuts. Tank and Phoenix, freed by the arriving FBI agents, immediately began helping to evacuate the burning building. But it was Tobias who provided the most shocking revelation of all. As Sarah scooped him up and carried him to safety, the boy pressed a small flash drive into her hand. "This is the real evidence," he whispered urgently. "Everything Daddy did, everyone who helped him, all the money, all the kids. I've been collecting it for 2 years, but I had to hide it where he'd never think to look." "Where?" Sarah asked, amazed by this child's courage and intelligence. "In my school locker," Tobias said with a weak smile. "Daddy never cared about my school stuff. He thought I was too stupid to understand what he was doing, but I understood everything, and I remembered everything." Outside the burning cabin, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Real FBI agents were arresting the fake ones, while paramedics tended to the injured bikers. But the most important figure was a woman in a crisp FBI windbreaker who approached Sarah with a mixture of relief and professional urgency. "Agent Patricia Mills," she said, extending her hand. "I've been working undercover for 18 months, trying to infiltrate Vincent Corleone's network." Sarah's jaw dropped. But you're supposed to be dead." The video showed my partner, Agent Jennifer Hayes, who volunteered to pose as me when we realized Vincent was getting suspicious. She's been in protective custody ever since, helping us build our case from the inside. Agent Mills knelt down beside Tobias, her voice gentle but urgent. "Tobias, we've been trying to reach you for months. Your mother contacted us before she died, She was working with us to expose your father's operation. Mama was helping you. Tobias's eyes widened with hope and pain. She was a hero, Mills confirmed. She gathered evidence for months, documenting everything your father did. But when Vincent discovered her cooperation, well, you know what happened. But her sacrifice wasn't in vain. Combined with what you've collected, we have enough evidence to bring down the entire network. Jake appeared at Sarah's side, his face bruised but his eyes blazing with satisfaction. Kellerman's in custody, he reported, and he's singing like a canary. Apparently, when you're facing life in prison, loyalty to Vincent Corleone doesn't seem so important anymore. Agent Mills stood up, her expression grim but determined. We're moving to Vincent's compound tonight, but I have to warn you, this goes deeper than any of us imagined. We've identified trafficking networks in 12 states, with connections to operations in 6 countries. Vincent Corleone was just one node in a web that spans the globe. What about the children? Sarah asked, the social worker and her refusing to be satisfied with just arrests. What about the victims? That's where you come in, Mills replied. We're going to need people we can trust to help with victim services, witness protection, family reunification. People who understand that this isn't just about law enforcement. It's about healing. Tobias tugged on Sarah's sleeve. Miss Sarah, there's something else. Something I didn't tell you before because I was scared. What is it, sweetheart? There are other kids like me. Kids whose parents are part of Daddy's business, but who want to help stop it. We've been talking to each other, sharing information, trying to protect the younger ones. We call ourselves the Truth Keepers. The revelation sent chills down Sarah's spine. These children, victims themselves, have been organizing, gathering evidence, and protecting each other in ways that the adult world had failed to do. How many? Agent Mills asked, her professional composure cracking slightly. 17 of us in this city, Tobias replied. But we know there are more in other places. We've been using online games to communicate, sharing what we know about the bad adults. Jake shook his head in amazement. Kid, you've been running your own intelligence operation. We had to, Tobias said simply. The grown-ups weren't listening. But you listened, Mr. Jake. You and Miss Sarah and your friends. You were the first adults who believed me and tried to help. As the sun began to rise over the smoldering remains of the cabin, Sarah realized that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The network they'd uncovered was vast and powerful, but it wasn't invincible. And they had something Vincent Corleone and his associates had never counted on. The courage of children who refused to be silenced, and adults who were willing to risk everything to protect them. Rebecca Stark appeared at Jake's side, freed from her captivity and already working on her phone. I've got editors standing by, she announced. This story breaks in 6 hours, simultaneously in newspapers across the country. Vincent Corleone's empire is about to become front-page news. Jake looked at his ex-wife with a mixture of admiration and regret. Rebecca, save it for later, she interrupted, but her smile took the sting out of her words. Right now, we have work to do. All of us. As the FBI agents prepared for their coordinated raids, and the bikers of Thunder Road MC found themselves transformed from outlaws into unlikely heroes, Sarah held Tobias close and felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The darkness was deep, and the enemy was powerful, but they had something stronger than corruption and cruelty. They had truth, courage, and love. And sometimes, that was enough to change the world. The truth is finally coming out. But can they really bring down such a massive network? And what will happen to Tobias and the other brave children who risked everything? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because the final confrontation is going to be epic. The coordinated raids began at exactly 6 a.m. as Rebecca Stark's explosive expose hit newsstands and websites across the nation. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Children of Courage. How young heroes exposed a global trafficking empire." But the real action was happening simultaneously in 17 locations across 3 states, as FBI teams moved to dismantle Vincent Corleone's network once and for all. At the Corleone mansion, Vincent himself was in his study, frantically shredding documents and wiping hard drives when the battering ram took down his front door. Agent Mills led the charge, her weapon drawn and her voice carrying the authority of justice finally served. Vincent Corleone, You're under arrest for human trafficking, murder, conspiracy, and crimes against children." But Vincent wasn't going down without a fight. As FBI agents swarmed through his mansion, he triggered a hidden alarm that sent alerts to his remaining associates, a final, desperate attempt to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses before the law could reach them. Meanwhile, at the safe house where Tobias and the other truth keepers had been relocated, Sarah watched the news coverage with a mixture of pride and anxiety. The children had provided detailed intelligence about Vincent's operations, but she knew that corner predators were at their most dangerous. "Miss Sarah," Tobias said, tugging on her sleeve as he watched the television. "What if Daddy gets away? What if he hurts the other kids before the police can save them?" Before Sarah could answer, Jake burst through the door, his face grim with urgency. "We've got a problem. Vincent's activated some kind of dead man switch. If he goes down, he's taking everyone with him." Agent Mills appeared on the secure video link they'd established. "Vincent's threatening to execute the children in his custody unless we back off. He's got them in an underground facility beneath his warehouse district. We're looking at a hostage situation." Sarah's blood ran cold. "How many children?" 12 that we know of," Mills replied. "Ages 6 to 14. Vincent's using them as human shields." The room fell silent as the magnitude of the situation sank in. All their victories, all their evidence, all their courage. It could all be meaningless if Vincent succeeded in his final act of evil. But then Tobias stood up, his small frame somehow radiating determination that filled the room. "I know where they are," he said quietly, "and I know how to get in without Daddy seeing us." Jake knelt down beside the boy. "Tobias, this is too dangerous. You've done enough." "No," Tobias interrupted, his voice carrying a strength that belied his years. "Those kids are there because of me. Because I escaped and Daddy got angry. I have to help save them. The facility is heavily guarded," Agent Mills warned through the video link. "Vincent's got at least 20 armed men, plus automated security systems. It's a fortress." Diesel, who had been quietly studying building schematics on his laptop, looked up with a grim smile. "Maybe for the FBI. But we're not the FBI." Tank nodded in agreement. "We've been planning jobs like this our whole lives. The difference is, this time we're the good guys." Phoenix cracked his knuckles. "About time we used our skills for something that matters." Viper, his military training evident in his tactical assessment, pointed to the building plans. "There's a maintenance tunnel system that connects to the old subway lines. If we can get in through there, we can bypass most of the security." "And then what?" Sarah asked, her heart pounding with fear for these men who had become her unlikely family. "Then we do what we do best," Jake replied, his voice hard as steel. "We raise hell." Agent Mills shook her head. "I can't officially sanction this. If you go in there, you're on your own." "We've been on our own our whole lives," Jake said with a bitter smile. Nothing new there. But Tobias had been thinking, his 8-year-old mind working through possibilities that the adults had missed. What if we don't have to fight our way in? What if Daddy lets us in? Everyone turned to look at him. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Sarah asked. "Daddy thinks I'm still working for him," Tobias explained. "He doesn't know I told you the truth. What if I call him and tell him I escaped from the FBI? Tell him I want to come home?" The suggestion sent chills through the room. Jake shook his head immediately. "Absolutely not. We're not using you as bait." "But I wouldn't be bait," Tobias insisted. "I'd be the key. Daddy would let me in because he thinks I'm still his son. And once I'm inside, I can help the other kids while you come through the tunnels." Sarah felt her heart breaking at the courage of this remarkable child. "Tobias, if something goes wrong." "Something's already wrong," he replied with heartbreaking wisdom. "Those kids are going to die if we don't help them. And I'm the only one who can get close enough to Daddy to make a difference." The debate continued for precious minutes, but in the end, they all knew that Tobias was right. His plan was dangerous, but it was also their best chance of saving the hostages. 2 hours later, as the sun reached its zenith, the most unlikely rescue operation in FBI history began to unfold. Tobias, wearing a wire so small it was virtually undetectable, walked up to the warehouse entrance with his hands raised in apparent surrender. "Daddy," he called out, his voice carrying just the right note of fear and confusion. "Daddy, I'm scared. The FBI people were mean to me, and I ran away. I want to come home." Vincent Corleone appeared at the warehouse entrance, his face a mask of suspicion and rage. But when he saw his son, apparently alone and frightened, something like paternal instinct flickered in his eyes. "Tobias," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Come here, son." As Tobias walked toward his father, Jake and the Thunder Road MC were making their way through the maintenance tunnels, guided by building schematics and Viper's military expertise. Behind them, Sarah and Agent Mills coordinated with FBI tactical teams, ready to move the moment they got the signal. Inside the warehouse, Tobias found himself face to face with a monster who had destroyed so many lives. But he also saw something else: 12 terrified children huddled in a corner, their eyes wide with fear and desperate hope. "I missed you, Daddy," Tobias lied, allowing Vincent to embrace him. "I was so scared without you." "It's okay, son," Vincent murmured, but his eyes were cold and calculating. "Everything's going to be fine now. We're going to take a little trip, just you and me and our friends here." Tobias knew that trip meant death for all of them. Vincent was planning to eliminate the evidence, including his own son, rather than face justice. But the boy had one more card to play. "Daddy," he said innocently, "can I say goodbye to my friends first? I want to tell them not to be scared." Vincent nodded absently, his attention focused on the approaching sirens outside. He didn't notice as Tobias moved among the other children, whispering urgent instructions, preparing them for what was about to happen. And then, with a sound like thunder, the warehouse's rear wall exploded inward as Jake and his brothers made their dramatic entrance. The Thunder Road MC had arrived, and they were ready for war. "Vincent Corleone." Jake's voice boomed across the warehouse. "Your son's not the only one who's been collecting evidence. We've got everything. Every name, every transaction, every crime you've committed. It's over." Vincent spun around, his face contorting with rage as he realized he'd been outmaneuvered by an 8-year-old boy and a group of bikers. "You think you've won?" he snarled, pulling out a detonator. "I'll bring this whole place down before I let you take me." But Vincent had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated the courage of children who had been pushed too far and the determination of adults who had found something worth fighting for. As chaos erupted in the warehouse, as FBI agents stormed the building and Thunder Road MC fought Vincent's remaining guards, Tobias did something that would be remembered for the rest of his life. With the fearless courage that only children possess, he tackled his father's legs, sending the detonator flying across the warehouse floor. "Run!" he screamed to the other children. "Run to the bikers. They're here to save us." The battle was brief but fierce. Vincent's mercenaries were no match for men who were fighting not for money or power, but for the lives of innocent children. When the smoke cleared, Vincent Corleone lay unconscious on the warehouse floor, his empire in ruins and his victims finally free. As paramedics tended to the rescued children and FBI agents processed the crime scene, Sarah found herself holding Tobias close, marveling at the courage of this remarkable boy who had risked everything to save others. "Is it really over?" Tobias asked, his voice small and tired. "The fighting's over," Sarah replied, stroking his hair. "But the healing is just beginning." Jake approached them, his leather vest torn and his face bruised, but his eyes shining with something he hadn't felt in years: pride in doing the right thing. "What happens now?" he asked. Agent Mills, coordinating the massive evidence collection effort, overheard the question. "Now we rebuild," she said simply. "We help these children heal, we prosecute everyone involved in this network, and we make sure something like this never happens again." Rebecca Stark, documenting everything for her follow-up stories, looked up from her notebook. "And we tell the world about the children who refused to be silenced, and the unlikely heroes who answered their call for help." As the sun began to set over the warehouse district, painting the sky in shades of hope and redemption, Sarah realized that they had done more than just rescue children and arrest criminals. They had proven that courage could triumph over corruption, that love could overcome evil, and that sometimes the most unlikely alliances could change the world. The war was won, but the real victory was just beginning. Justice is finally served. But how will our heroes rebuild their lives after such an incredible journey? And what does the future hold for Tobias and the other brave children? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed because the conclusion of this amazing story will leave you inspired. 6 months later, The morning sun streamed through the windows of the newly established Truth Keepers Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping child victims of trafficking and supporting the brave young people who had helped expose Vincent Corleone's network. Sarah Connor stood in her office, watching through the window as children played in the secure courtyard below. Children who had once lived in fear but were now learning to trust and hope again. Among them was Tobias, now 9 years old and thriving under Sarah's legal guardianship. The adoption papers had been finalized just last week, making official what had been true in their hearts for months. The boy who had once run terrified through the night was now laughing as he played catch with Tank Rodriguez, whose own daughters had finally been allowed to visit their father again. "Miss Sarah, Mom," Tobias called up to her window, still adjusting to the new title that filled Sarah's heart with joy every time she heard it. "Mr. Tank says he's going to teach me how to change motorcycle oil later." Sarah laughed and waved back. The Thunder Road Motorcycle Club had undergone its own transformation over the past 6 months. What had started as an outlaw biker gang had evolved into something unprecedented, a legitimate security and advocacy organization that specialized in protecting vulnerable children and supporting law enforcement in trafficking cases. Jake Bourne appeared in Sarah's doorway, no longer wearing the leather vest of a club president, but dressed in the crisp uniform of a licensed private security contractor. The transformation was remarkable, but the man underneath remained the same, fierce, protective, and utterly committed to the children they served. "The FBI just called," he announced, his voice carrying a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. "Vincent Corleone was sentenced this morning. Life without parole, plus 847 years for good measure." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "And the others?" "Detective Kellerman got 45 years. Judge Morrison, Police Captain Hayes, and the rest of the network. They're all going away for a very long time." Jake's smile was grim but satisfied. "Turns out when you threaten children, even hardened criminals in prison don't take kindly to you." The trials have been a media sensation, with Rebecca Stark's investigative reporting earning her a Pulitzer Prize and bringing international attention to the issue of child trafficking. But more importantly, they had resulted in the rescue of over 200 children from trafficking networks across the globe and the arrest of more than 150 perpetrators. "There's something else," Jake continued, his expression softening. "Rebecca's here. She wants to talk to both of us." Sarah raised an eyebrow. Jake's relationship with his ex-wife had been slowly healing over the past months, built on mutual respect and shared purpose rather than the passion that had originally brought them together. It was healthier this way, and Sarah had been surprised to find herself becoming friends with a brilliant journalist. They found Rebecca in the Foundation's conference room, surrounded by photographs and documents that told the story of their incredible journey. But today, she wasn't there as a reporter. She was there as a friend with news that would change their lives once again. "I've been offered a position," Rebecca announced without preamble. "Executive Director of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They want me to head up a new task force focused on trafficking prevention and survivor support." Jake's face lit up with pride. "Rebecca, that's incredible. You deserve it." "I do," she agreed with characteristic confidence. "But I'm not taking it unless you two agree to come with me. Sarah, they want you to head up the Victim Services Division. And Jake, they're offering you a position as Director of Security Operations." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The opportunity was everything she'd ever dreamed of, a chance to help children on a national scale, with resources and support she'd never had before. "What about the Foundation here?" she asked. "What about the children we're already helping?" "The Foundation will continue," Rebecca assured her. "Agent Mills has agreed to take over day-to-day operations, and the Thunder Road MC will maintain their security contracts. But Sarah, think about what we could accomplish on a national level." Before Sarah could respond, Tobias burst into the conference room, his face flushed with excitement. Mom, guess what? The other Truth Keepers want to start chapters in their cities. We're going to help kids everywhere." Sarah knelt down to her son's level, marveling once again at his resilience and determination. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. But that's a big responsibility." "I know," Tobias said seriously. "But we're not little kids anymore. We're survivors. And survivors help other survivors." His words crystallized everything Sarah had been feeling. This wasn't just about their local success. It was about creating a movement that could protect children everywhere. "There's one condition," Jake said, looking at Rebecca with an expression Sarah had never seen before, hope mixed with vulnerability. "We do this together. All of us. As a team." Rebecca's smile was radiant. "I was hoping you'd say that." As they discussed the details of their new venture, Sarah found herself thinking about the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been a burned-out social worker, Jake had been an outlaw biker, and Tobias had been a terrified child running for his life. Now they were a family, not bound by blood, but by something stronger, shared purpose and unconditional love. The Thunder Road MC had found their true calling as protectors of the innocent. Diesel now runs a program teaching self-defense to at-risk youth. Phoenix had become a counselor specializing in trauma recovery. Viper used his military skills to train law enforcement in tactical rescue operations. And Tank had opened his own motorcycle repair shop, employing former gang members and giving them a second chance at legitimate lives. "There's something else," Tobias said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "I wrote something for the other Truth Keepers. Want to hear it?" Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with pride as her son unfolded what appeared to be a letter. "Dear friends," Tobias read aloud, his young voice carrying wisdom beyond his years. "We used to be scared all the time. We used to think nobody would believe us, nobody would help us, nobody would care. But we learned something important. When bad people try to hurt children, good people will always fight back. We learned that families aren't just about blood. They're about people who choose to love and protect each other. We learned that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you are scared. And most importantly, we learned that our voices matter. When we speak the truth, people listen. When we ask for help, heroes appear. When we refuse to give up, miracles happen." He looked up from the paper, his eyes shining with the confidence of a child who had faced the worst of humanity and emerged stronger. "We're not victims anymore. We're truth keepers, and we're going to make sure no child ever has to face what we faced alone." The room fell silent as the power of his words sank in. Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy and pride, not sorrow. "So," Rebecca said, her own voice thick with emotion, "are we ready to change the world?" Jake stood up, extending his hand to Sarah. "We already did change the world. Now we're just making sure it stays changed." As Sarah took his hand and pulled Tobias into their embrace, she realized that their story wasn't ending. It was beginning. The little boy who had run to bikers for help had become the catalyst for a movement that would protect children for generations to come. The Outlaw Motorcycle Club had become guardians of justice. The burned-out social worker had found her calling as a national advocate, and together, they had proven that love was stronger than evil, that courage could overcome corruption, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes were exactly what the world needed. Outside the Foundation's windows, the sun was setting on one chapter of their lives and rising on another. But whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family forged in the crucible of shared purpose and unbreakable love. The Truth Keepers were ready to change the world, one child at a time. 3 years later, the Truth Keepers Foundation had chapters in all 50 states and 12 countries. Tobias Corleone Connor, now 12 years old, had become the youngest person ever to address the United Nations on the subject of child trafficking. His adoptive parents, Sarah and Jake, who had married in a small ceremony surrounded by their Thunder Road family, continued their work protecting children around the world. And in a small town in Montana, a frightened 8-year-old girl who had escaped from traffickers found herself standing outside a motorcycle club's compound, clutching a backpack full of evidence and hoping that someone, somewhere, would believe her story and help her find justice. The Truth Keepers were ready. And that's the end of our incredible journey. From a terrified little boy running for help to a global movement protecting children everywhere. What an amazing transformation. Thank you so much for joining me on this emotional roller coaster. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel for more incredible stories, and let me know in the comments which part moved you the most. Remember, sometimes the most unlikely heroes are exactly what the world needs. Until next time, keep believing in the power of courage, love, and hope.